Hello everybody, this episode is sponsored by Saint Ange Auto Parts. Saint Ange Auto Parts is located next to the Monrepo Credit Union and below the Clear Sky Hotel in Viewfort, very close to the Uptown Liquor Store. They carry the best brands for the best prices. Purchases are cash only. Business hours are Monday to Saturday from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can call in at 454-3030. You want more information. Remember to wear your mask while shopping, and if you go there, let them know we sent you. All right, let's get into it.
Sure, that's all.
Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Family Reflections. I'm your host, Keddy Emmanuel, and on the line with me today, I am elated. I'm excited. I feel privileged to have Dr. Kenny Anthony. If you don't know him very well, he has served a large part of his political career as the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the leader of the SLP, St. Lucia Labour Party. He's done quite a lot to advance the development of St. Lucia, and I could think of only a handful of people that I would want to have this discussion with, and he's definitely towards the top of that list. Dr. Anthony, can you just say hello to the people?
Greetings, everyone. It's a real pleasure to join you this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation. I want you to feel free, anything you need to ask me. Don't hold back. Really, I don't think that there's anything that's off the table, so to put it. Anything that is really bothering you, anything you were preoccupied with, then raise it, and I'll do my very best to respond. So I'm looking forward to a wonderful evening with you. Okay. And I must tell you that I'm very happy that this kind of discourse can take place. This kind of exchange can take place, and that there are people that we can reach with our conversation this afternoon in a very difficult environment, because conversations are not the easiest these days, given, of course, the COVID pandemic and all the issues that have been thrown up. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, and we can get going as soon as you're ready.
Absolutely. And guys, of course, as always, I'm going to hop in and tell you that if you appreciate what we're doing here at I Know the Pictures, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And also, given the nature of this episode, I have to jump in here at the very top and tell you that I know you're probably tempted to say, because you see me talking with Dr. Anthony today, that, say by SLP, something of that nature. But the goal here this afternoon is to talk about politics in general in St. Lucia, in the Caribbean. And I think Dr. Anthony is definitely somebody that can give me some very good perspective here today. All right. So that being said, Dr. Anthony, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Tell us a little bit about how you got into politics, into the career that you did.
You asked me to share stories, so there's a lot to share. It's hard to reduce it to all the essential details, but I'm going to do my very best. First of all, you need to know a little bit about me. I was born in a very small community, Riviera, very close to Swazel. Riviera is a little village, or even you might want to call it a little hamlet, between Piai and, of course, Swazel. And it got its name from a very famous river, the Dore River, and it's called Riviera. So I was born there. But I grew up on a very large estate. In fact, on really 3 estates, which my father managed. One was called Park Estate, very close to Saltibus in the north. Then there was the Riviera Estate, which I've just described. And then, of course, there was a Degatier Estate, which included a property called a bungalow, and then, of course, Degatier. Inevitably, the estate employed several individuals because you're dealing with three very large estates.
Right.
And during the political season, the political parties in those days with blaring loudspeakers attached, of course, many to their vehicles would come and hold public meetings with the workers on their estates. From River Dory, I went to live with my father and my mother at Park Estate. There was a huge estate house where most of the employees worked because that estate was particularly rich. I mean, they had all kinds of crops on the estates, from bananas to nutmegs to coffee to cocoa. I mean, you just name it. You got those crops there.
Okay.
So at a very tender age, I would listen and hear the speakers as they would address the workers. And, you know, those were very exciting days, on almost, you might want to say, revolutionary days, because many of the political parties, especially the St. Lucia Labour Party at the time, would have been challenging the status quo, which meant, of course, the plantocracy and the owners and managers of those estates. Mm. But I developed a very early fascination for the mannerisms of the speakers on the platform, the way they would address the workers and the way they would speak to the workers. Now, I grew up with a very large family. My father had 10 children. There were 5 with my mother, 4 with another lady, the first set of children, and then there was one who's still alive who came after us with another lady. So, in effect, my father had children with 3 women. Mm-hmm. And the first 10 were all boys. The first 9, were all boys. So there were no girls. And inevitably, we got into a lot of mischief, a lot of trouble, because we roamed those estates very widely. And I have the scars to prove how much trouble we got into, including myself.
That sounds like a great childhood, right?
Yeah. And don't forget, it was an exciting place because on each side of the estates, we had rivers. So nearly every day we were at the river or roaming for fruits or just having fun. But because of the fact that we were such a large family and we lived in the same estate house, it gave us an opportunity for all kinds of activities. And one of the things that we did was to play what I call politics, meaning that, and you have to remember, there was no electricity in those days. We had gas lamps, yes, that helped the situation. Uh-huh. So at nights, my other brothers would gather, around in an open space, and I would climb on a chair and I would pretend to be one of the speakers and address them on the issues of the day. So I began to practice at a very tender age the art of public speaking. So much so, they nicknamed me Dr. Carl Le Corbinier. And I have a brother, he's now passed on, my eldest brother, who continuously referred to me by that name, even if I was very young, because he felt that somehow I mimicked Carl Le Corbinier exceedingly well. Of course, after the estates, there was so much in my life. For a period of my life between 1959 and 1963, I went to school in St. Vincent. There's a long story behind that, which is take probably the afternoon to share with you. So I spent 4 years in St. Vincent, ostensibly learning how to speak English well, because St. Vincent, of course, was an English-speaking country. Right. They had their own Creole, but very different to ours.
No, I didn't even know they had Creole there.
Their own form of Creole. I mean, their own form of pronunciation, etc. Okay. So in St. Vincent, I spent 4 years, let us say from 59 to 63, and then returned to St. Lucia, then back to the Library Boys, then onto the Library Boys School, and then the Vieux-Fort Senior Secondary School. At the Vieux-Fort Senior Secondary School, I became the school's head prefect. I had an opportunity for a leadership role. So I honed my skills as a young leader because I had a lot of responsibility in those days. And from being head prefect, I mean, there were other responsibilities, became a sergeant in the cadet corps, went into cadetting and those things. all of those were opportunities along the way to help me to get a good sense of the possibilities in my own future life, what I liked, and what skills I had. After before senior secondary school, then it was on to teaching. And from teaching, after becoming a qualified teacher, went on to university. In fact, I think your mom was a former student of mine, and we had a fascinating relationship. She was always a very interesting student and very passionate. And I have to tell you, she was extraordinarily well behaved. She never got into any kind of problems whatsoever. And it was really a joy to teach her. So on to university, and then from university back to St. Lucia. Initially got involved in trade union politics, became the president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union for about a year in a very difficult period. I was approaching 1978, 1979, when, of course, St. Lucia was going through a very difficult period, pre-independence period. That was a time the Labour Party was mobilizing against the then United Workers' Party. So there was a lot of demonstrations and counter-demonstrations and trade union activity, etc. And then, of course, we had independence in 1979. And you'll recall from your own history that independence was preceded by an island-wide strike by public servants, the longest strike in the island, some 49 days. In actual fact, I was at the university at the time pursuing a second degree, but I did come back from time to time, got involved. From 79, I became a young minister in the St. Lucia Labour Party government at the time, led by Alan Louisi. And there's another story there that I'm going to share the details with you very briefly. I was asked to serve as a Minister of Education as a senator because I was not an elected member. Okay. But I was too young to be a senator because at the time, the prescribed age in the Constitution was 30 years. I was just 28. So the problem arose, well, how could I be a minister since I did not satisfy the prescribed age of 30 to be a senator? In its wisdom, the Alan Louisi government decided that they would appoint me as quote-unquote minister designate. So I carried this rather unique and unusual title, minister of designate, which meant minister in waiting. And they decided to amend the Constitution to reduce the age to 21. Wow. And of course, it was said at the time that I'm the cause of the only amendment to the St. Lucia Constitution. I caused this amendment, but there were a lot of internal skirmishes inside the Labour Party at the time, which led to the delay in amending the Constitution. So when the Constitution was eventually amended to reduce the age from 30 to 21, by then I had turned 30 and could have been appointed as an ordinary senator. But I'm still proud of this achievement because what it meant was that the age of appointment to Senate was reduced to 21, and it meant that younger people got a chance now to be appointed to the Senate, because certainly while the Senate was intended to be an upper house of supposedly of persons of experience and wisdom, nevertheless, it was critical and crucial that the younger generation had a chance to enter and participate in government. Hence, reducing the age to 21 was crucial.
Right. And
after the upheavals in the St. Lucia Labour Party, I headed back to the university, went to do a law degree, and then opted to stay at the university for a while. Went on to the UK, did a PhD, did my bar examinations in the UK, and then came back to teach at the University of the West Indies. And from the University of the West Indies on to CARICOM to serve as their general counsel for about a year. And then from there, I came into St. Lucia in 1996 to head the St. Lucia Labour Party. And that, I think, encapsulated is a summary of this very unusual life I've had.
And that's quite a story, right? And I was following your story there, and it sounds to me like even from playing politics with your brothers there, and honing those public speaking skills, and kind of looking at the politicians of the day at the time when you were a child, and seeing how they were mobilizing people and inspiring people. Where along this timeline, from there all the way up to you teaching at senior sec, and eventually having amendment being brought forward to the St. Lucia Constitution, where is the point where you realize, okay, Let me strive forward a bit here. Let me strive to use these skills and these abilities to change things politically.
Okay. I would say that the greatest influence on me, in fact, came from George Odlum and Peter Josie in those early days, 1978, 1977, 78, 79. And I was caught up in this spirit of the times because St. Lucia, like other Caribbean countries, went through a period of Black definition, Black nationalism. That was a period when we wore Afro haircuts and so on, and dashikis, and learned to come to terms with our Blackness as Caribbean people. And St. Lucia was no different. And then, of course, you had the best intellectual minds in those days, preaching from the platforms, particularly Forum, which was headed by people like George Odlum, Peter Josie, Hilford de Turville, Calix George, etc. So there was intense political discourse occurring in St. Lucia. And there can be no question that the ideas that I learned really fascinated me in that period. But I always had a passion for intellectual life. And I felt a great sense of inadequacy without being schooled, without getting an opportunity for exposure. So the next stage of my life was really getting to university. And throughout my life, there was always a competition between being an academic and being a politician. And my journey eventually took me to being a politician. And there are those who knew me well and expressed immense disappointment that I had given up on my academic career for a political life. Some have not forgiven me up to this day, despite the fact that we laugh about it. So I would say that the defining moment came with my exposure to the Odlums and to the Josies. I'm gonna make no adverse comment on Peter Josie at this stage. I'm just chronicling a certain kind of history.
Okay.
And then after I had that first bit of exposure with the St. Lucia Labour Party in 79, after, of course, the breakup and the difficulties that occurred then, the upheavals that occurred then, I realized that I would not have been able to survive in St. Lucia without having an independent economic base. And when I looked at my options, I came to the conclusion that the only economic base that I could really get as an independent thinker, an independent actor in political life, was to pursue a law degree. I think for me that was the most important decision at that time, because I realized that there was no hope for me. I mean, I was too politically tainted, and no one would want to employ me. Certainly the government of St. Lucia would have no interest in me, especially because my first degree was in history and government. So I then decided, look, if I wanted to get into politics eventually, I had to have the means of survival. And so I decided to pursue a law degree, which took me away from St. Lucia. Then after pursuing the law degree, and incidentally, I got a first-class honors degree because in law, as indeed was my first degree. So I have 2 degrees from UWI, both of them with first-class honors. I don't know how many students do have that kind of qualification, but it's not something I talk about. You ever hear it? So I'm just taking the opportunity. Yeah. Because I know I'm talking to a lot of young people to say, look, there's so much in this life that you can do if you want to, if you really want to. So much that can really inspire you, but a lot depends on what choices you make. Once I had done that second degree and decided to teach at the Faculty of Law, that's when my passion for intellectual life came in research. And don't forget, I was a former trained teacher. Right. Went to the Teachers College. And you will notice up to this day, people tease me and say I'm still a teacher and more a teacher and less a politician. Which
I wouldn't call that. I'm sorry?
Yes. So sorry, just a minor interruption. Yeah. So, as I said, the two were in competition all the time. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I made the decision. So the really defining moments had a lot to do with the experience in the Labour Party, 79, 82, choosing a new career. meaning going to do law, and then the other decision, deciding that I had to give up my academic career and return to St. Lucia to lead the Labour Party.
Okay. And I can only imagine that there was some tension around those moments and making those decisions, right?
A lot. Yep. A lot, I can tell you, because the pressures were immense after the debacle of 79, 82. I would meet young St. Lucians, and some would accuse me of abandoning the country, and that kind of thing, although, of course, I had very little exposure. So I always carried the burden.
Yeah.
But the point is that I felt it was absolutely crucial that I do not let other persons make decisions for me, that I make the decisions for myself on my own terms, for my own purposes. And that's important, that you have to have the ability at some point to make the decisions for yourself, right, and to make meaningful decisions that will shape you. You can't allow others to make decisions for you.
You absolutely have to take control of your own life.
Your own life, your own destiny. And you have to affirm your independence from time to time. It's vital, it is necessary.
Yeah. And, I have a docket here, but every now and again, I'm going to mention a question that comes to mind here. You mentioned a little bit about, meeting young Lucians and them saying that, they felt abandoned by you and so on. It kind of reminds me of people that I have met, because I spent many years after leaving, because I went to senior sec, now Vieux Fort Compre. And after leaving there, I went to the US for my studies. And I know a lot of people that I went to school with, a lot of very intelligent people that St. Lucia would need here, who have ideas, who have ways that they can contribute to St. Lucia's development, and they feel guilty because they're not here to help. What would you say to them? It kind of hurts feeling like you're a part of brain drain. You know what I mean? What would you say to that?
I can understand the reaction, and sometimes they would be made to feel very guilty that they have been trained and educated by resources of this country, and they're not giving back. Now, a couple of things. Everyone has a moment in history. It is for you to know when the moment has come and when to make use of it. Everything doesn't happen to you at the very outset. As I tried to say to you earlier on, I've had specific moments in history that allowed me to make certain decisions. And for a lot of St. Lucians who are overseas, their moments will come. And their moments may say to them, it is time to return home to contribute. It is time to be part of the process that is occurring. Or alternatively, the moment may say to them, look, you have certain gifts, certain strengths, certain expertise, but really you are best able to contribute to your country by exploring that potential that you have. And I think as a country, those of us who are here need to understand this. How often do we look around and see St. Lucians who are abroad and have done well and do our country proud? I mean, look at Professor Williams. I mean, speaking, well-respected in the United States. I mean, on CNN, recently he did a major interview. Look at a young Dr. Bissett, Richard Frederick's daughter. She's on CNN frequently talking about COVID and the pandemic and so on. So my point really to you is this, that it doesn't mean that because you are serving overseas or you're remaining overseas that you cannot contribute to the country. You can, because each and every individual, when they become known as a St. Lucian, they contribute to the history, to the reputation, and to the legacy of the country. And people want to know, what is this little country that has produced these outstanding individuals? Right. Just imagine, I mean, the truth of the matter is that as a Arthur Lewis and as a Derek Walcott would not have emerged had they not gone overseas and had they not had exposure to the metropolitan countries and to Europe and to the United States. They became defined. They contributed to a pool of knowledge. And to the credit of, say, both of them, they returned to the Caribbean to serve to continue that powerful legacy. Yeah. So you need not feel guilty about it. We ourselves who remain must not make our nationals overseas feel guilty. But really, at the end of the day, it is your passion. Whether your passion can discover that moment in history where you become useful to your people with the skills that you have and you make the decisions. But as I said, you can remain sometimes overseas. You can become a person, an outstanding individual, a person of renown. And the key thing is never forget who you are, who created you, who produced you, and who paved the way and paved that road for you to gain the recognition that you have gained. I think that is critical and that is crucial. We all can't come back to serve. The reality is that the world is changing so rapidly, and we have to learn new skills so very quickly now. I mean, sometimes I'm just astounded by the sheer pace and rapidity of development, of changes in the society. I've just turned 70. This is my 70th year.
Oh, wow. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I'm not so sure that's deserving of congratulations because I'm painfully aware that time is marching on. But notwithstanding, my real point to you is this, that over the last 20 years, I have watched so many changes. So much is incredible. It's like the mobile phones. I remember when we had our battles with cable and wireless to deregulate and, of course, to open up competition. And look, 10, 15 years later, there's an explosion. A new means of communication that has redefined the entire world.
Absolutely.
And we have become part of it. So it's for me, it's utter amazement. And we need to appreciate and understand this, that we can't remain static as a small society. And we need our best brains all the time to reach out, to touch the wider world, to gain the experience. That way, they can be far more beneficial to the country. And of course, for those who want to come back into politics, I say to them, look, don't listen to what you hear about politics. All politicians are bad people, and all politicians are there to exploit individuals. Our politicians are there to get rich, make lots of money, and engage in... No. I believe that there's honor and there's integrity in politics. And yes, you're going to get bad eggs. You're going to get persons who bring the country into disrepute. But the point is, in all professions, these things happen. I just want to say that politics is a profession of great honor, of great service. And those of us who get involved in it need to understand that we have a special responsibility to the people who have given us the opportunity to represent them.
Yeah, and two things there. The first being that what I'm taking from your response there is that it's far more important for St. Lucians abroad to focus on realizing their potential and grabbing the opportunities that they have to make an impact from where they are and being who they are than it is for them to be guilty and feel bad about not being able to physically return to St. Lucia.
And look, let's not forget, we now have a revolution in media, in communications, social media. Look at us today. There are possibly many St. Lucians listening to this exchange that we're having this afternoon. And we have all been brought closer together to understand the mysteries of the world in which we live. But at the same time, now we can speak to each other with absolute ease.
Yeah.
And it's just... remarkable. I mean, that you can have a virtual meeting and we can see each other face to face and dialogue with each other. And that is part of the transformation of which I spoke that has occurred in the last couple of years. It's awesome.
Right, absolutely, and especially during this time of COVID, it's been instrumental in keeping the world turning, and I think some of us may take that for granted. I don't think it's many of us, but if not for technology, if COVID had happened somewhere in the 1990s, I think the effects would be so much more damaging than they are right now because of the internet. By the way, the second thing that you mentioned that I wanted to speak on is you mentioned that many people might say that politics is in and of itself something to be avoided, something bad, and everybody's bad. So it's kind of refreshing to hear you say that there is integrity and honor, and it's a viable profession for someone that wants to make change happen.
No, absolutely. The thing is this, a lot of people don't realize that politics does require certain skills. It's not just a question of being educated, having a degree, having had some kind of exposure. But the thing is this, not everybody can be a politician. And I can tell you, those who are intellectuals who try to cross the bridge into politics, sometimes they have tremendous difficulty to survive. When I first started and I returned to St. Lucia, despite my own passion for politics, I made my own errors. And there are moments when, of course, I had doubts. Look, did I do the right thing? But the thing I want to emphasize is that you have to bring certain skills to the craft of politics. For one thing, you must love people. You have to be passionate about the need to bring changes to people's lives. You have to know how to touch their lives, but you have to have the interpersonal skills. How to be able to interact with people, talk to persons, feel them, react to them with empathy. And despite what they tell you, you have to have the ability to talk to people on both sides or on all sides of the political fence. You have to talk, if I may put it this way, people who others perceive as enemies, as well as persons who are friends. You have to have the gift of conversation, of dialogue. You have to remain an intriguing person who can inspire, who can fascinate. In politics, they use a big word called charisma, but charisma, I think, is an exceptional quality, and it doesn't necessarily belong to all politicians. I think rather it is to allow people to discover your soul, your spirit, what you're capable of. Sometimes you get it wrong. Again, the moment in time is not yours. The moment in history is not yours. People misinterpret you, misunderstand you. Because, the thing is this with politics, those who oppose you try to make you who you are not. And sometimes they succeed in doing so, and so casting your reputation in a certain way that people believe that is the reputation you have and not who you are and what you are. But what I'm trying to tell you is that not everybody can be a politician. You can't jump into politics simply because you feel that it is one of the easiest things to do and winning votes is the easiest thing to do. No. You're not going to survive if you don't have special gifts. It's like Sir John Compton. Yeah. Sir John Compton left a legacy. I mean, he was in politics far longer than I am today. But the point is that he had special gifts as an individual, and that's why he's had his own legacy and he survived so very long. People have gifts that has an expiration period. They're able to make use of it, and then because the timing is just perfect for it, but then it disappears. Not as Sir John Compton. He had gifts over an extended period of time, and there were several moments in history for him. So what I'm just trying to say is that takes an extraordinary individual. It can't be that everybody would have the skills that he had. So I'm just saying to you that on the one hand, everybody believes they can be a politician. That's not so. I'm saying to others, yes, you should if you're inspired by politics. If you're inspired by my story and what occurred to me, and you want to become a politician, dedicate your life to changing the quality of life of persons, of making a difference in your own country, I'm saying to you, it's an honorable thing to do. It's an honorable profession that you have to be who you are. Don't let others define you, but understand that you require special skills to be able to survive in the jungle of politics.
All right. And that actually brings me to one of the questions that I had on the docket here, because it sounds like, just from what you're saying, that to be a politician, while you must have a heart for people and empathy and the sensitivity towards the people, you also need to have a thick skin, which it's interesting how that works together, right? So what I really want to know is how do you handle criticism? And for a large part of your life, you've been in the spotlight, and you've had continuous criticism. You're in the spotlight, your family. How did you preserve your mental health and find balance? And how do you continue to do so?
That's a very important question you've asked, because I have felt the sting of criticism. I've had to survive with it. And yes, I've had to handle it. But I think there are some basic things that you have to bear in mind. The first is, you can't get involved in political competition, in political life, if you do not understand that you're going to get criticism. And some of it can be very damaging, and some of it can be very, very biting. I don't know of no politician in this world who hasn't had a fair share of criticism, despite, of course, the outstanding successes they've had. If you want an example of what I'm talking about, you look like a Winston Churchill. Churchill, of course, not necessarily my favorite leader. He had his own bigotry. He was also racist. But there can be no doubt that he emerged as Prime Minister of the UK in a very critical period in UK history during the Second World War. And despite the fact that he helped to save the United Kingdom during his darkest hour, immediately after the elections, when he went to the polls, he lost the general elections. And one would have thought that somebody who had contributed so immensely to the survival of the UK, to the defeat of Germany, would have been celebrated in victory. That was not so. He lost the general election. So as politicians, we have to understand there are going to be the moments of success, there are going to be the moments of failure. So you have to be able to realize that there are moments when you're going to celebrate. You're going to enjoy the success that you have. But equally, there are going to be the moments of defeat. There are going to be the moments of despair. You can't survive without criticism. The criticism will come from citizens, encouraged, of course, from all kinds of sources, from your opponents, whether they're in political parties or they're in organizations or they're in media. You have to expect that. But the key thing always is to know what to respond to avoid the temptation of hatred, to hate persons because they criticize you. You may not like them, you may not like what they say, but you have to avoid the temptation to hate, because in politics it can consume you, it can easily happen to you. So you need, as an individual, to appreciate and understand the necessity of criticism and why it will occur and must occur. And you have to develop that ability to determine what you should respond to, what you should reject, what you should ignore. Now, that is part of the skills, bundle of skills that you require as a politician. And to be truthful, I can't say I was always successful. When I look back, there are things, for example, I should have responded to, I did not respond to. There are things which I responded to, which it would have been best if I avoided it and left it alone. And there were moments, of course, when I did respond to criticism when I felt it was justified, and the events subsequently proved that they were justified. Now, your family becomes crucial and critical. In a sense, I often say to people, like, your family is like a big armchair that when the troubles come, when the despair comes, that they can surround you and protect you. I have 3 children. They're 2 girls, and my son, there's Michelle, who's a lawyer. There's Della, who's a human resource manager, and there's Nikki, who's a chef. Now, generally speaking, they stayed away from the publicity of a political office. They didn't get involved. They did not have any sort of political life or political reputation, because they felt that the best way for them to emerge as young people and professionals was to be their own individuals, shaped by their own efforts. I mean, I think children were very sensitive to the fact that they wanted to be known on their own terms. They did not want anybody to say that because the father was prime minister, leader of the Social Labour Party, that's why they got this or that's why they did this. So they were very anxious to insulate themselves away from that. And I understood it perfectly well. But we had and continue to have an amazing relationship even up to this day. If anything, of course, they were always worried and they were concerned about me. But it is best that way, I found, because as I said, I can always sit in that armchair and then sink into it and be surrounded by them.
Okay.
So yes, you're going to need that thick skin, but you will also need the wisdom to understand that you have to tolerate criticism. That there's no leader on earth, no genuine leader that has been spared criticism of one kind or another. And they're going to make mistakes, and you really have to have the skill to know what you should respond to and what you should just discard and ignore. And yes, as I said to you, I've made a lot of mistakes in that regard. So tolerance is critical and crucial. Democracy will not be able to survive if you don't have tolerance. If you don't understand that there's a competition for ideas, competition for initiatives, competition for resources. Equally, you have to have some steel, by the way, some backbone. We haven't spoken about it. And what I mean is this, that you have to have the ability to take hard decisions. Now, that means that you know that you're going to inflict pain and you're going to cause pain. I will give you a good example. When we went to do elections in 2011, the manifesto of the Social Labour Party did say that we were going to introduce a value-added tax. Even if I had made previous statements about the fact that the value-added tax was an oppressive tax. And of course, my enemies have always thrown that in my face from time to time and said, but look at what you said, and then you went and you introduced that. My response has always been simple. Yes, it is an oppressive tax, I've said so. But we've also said in our manifesto that we introduced it because the country was at a tipping point. The country was near collapse, and we had to make dramatic changes to be able to pull the economy around. And I think one of the greatest successes I've had was a turnaround in the economy during the last term that we had. But of course, the country didn't accept it, didn't recognize it. And of course, they penalized me for it. But the reality was that we were able to pull the country from the brink of disaster, including, of course, unable to meet its debt and improving its financial status, etc. So what I'm just saying to you is that you as a leader, you will have to make tough decisions. Yeah. You will have to make decisions that will affect people's lives, will hurt some people, but you'll have to make decisions that are absolutely necessary, and you have to have the courage to be able to say, yes, I know this decision is going to hurt you. Yes, I know this decision is going to pain you, but there's a larger good here that we have to worry about, and we have a responsibility to the future. Just have faith and confidence that the pain and the And the despair you have is just temporary because all of us are collectively involved in that sacrifice. So you got to have what I call a larger and bigger wisdom in these matters.
And what's funny to me there is it kind of sounds like a parent. It sounds like a parent who knows, okay, if I make this decision now, you're not going to like it. You want to watch TV, but I have to ignore your protest here and make the hard decision and tell you, get to your books or lay off the candy or something, So it sounds similar to that.
I think you caught it right, and that's probably why I have earned the caricature of behaving as my father or my headmaster. My opinions my opinions always interpreted that way. My actions and opinions, that is, sorry, and even my enemies sometimes provoke me or try to provoke me and say, look, you're behaving like a headmaster, that you want to control everybody, etc., etc. So well-intentioned things do attract negativity sometimes. Some of it can be amusing, as I'm often amused by the suggestion that I'm a headmaster, but I guess it teaches in me sometimes and I can't help it. I can't discard it.
So I want to pivot now. Because just a while ago, we spoke a little bit about democracy being an exchange of ideas and not being able to have democracy without criticism and kind of a push back and forth. There's something that I've been wondering, because you look at American politics, right, and you have these primary debates and all of these things, and I've often wondered, why don't we have like national debates in St. Lucia or some sort of forum during the electoral process for the prospective future leaders to kind of make known their stance in terms of policy and direction for the country.
Okay. I think sometimes that people forget that we are a very young nation. I mean, if you look at the spectrum of time, we sometimes forget that St. Lucia is a society that is still in information, meaning that it is shaping up, it is growing up. We got independence in 1979, okay? And that's not very, very long ago.
Right.
And what I'm really trying to say to you is this, that we are evolving as a society, we are maturing as a society. And inevitably, some of the things that you're talking about will be a normal part of our lives. I'm going to give you an example. We have had an extraordinary tradition in oral politics. 10, 15 years ago, the platform enabled us to engage in political theater. We had huge rallies with thousands of people, with music, with dance, with addresses, and so on. Now, what has happened over the last couple of years, and in a sense accelerated by COVID, suddenly ability to manage social media has become important, and more it is going to replace what is taking place on the political platforms. I suspect that in the next 5 to 10 years, if not before that, the television medium is going to become far more critical for political debate and for political discourse. Now, I'm one of those who really believe that we have to shape our own political traditions. We must not allow other countries to shape it for us. Yeah. In much the same way that I repudiate the idea that we must follow blindly what is occurring in the United Kingdom because we got our constitution from the United Kingdom. Equally, I reject the notion that we must follow what is occurring in the United States. I mean, if anything, the experience of the U.S. in the last couple of years has shaken the foundations of U.S. democracy and the perception of the United States throughout the world. But I think inevitably, very soon, you're going to have these kinds of of debates. I think a lot of the issue right now has to do with the formalities of the process, ensuring the integrity of the process, ensuring debates that are free of partisanship, ensuring that we have debates that people could trust, including the politicians trusting the hosts of these debates. I think we are moving in that direction, and very soon you probably will get televised debates because that is a new politics that is emerging. So it's just a question of time. It'll probably happen in your generation very, very, very soon.
Okay, and that's very encouraging for me to hear. It's funny because you just touched on just now that the St. Lucian Constitution is based on the British blueprint. I'm kind of wondering what do you think is the role or importance of the British monarchy in our current context?
I think one of the good things that is happening in the Caribbean is that some countries have revisited the British monarchy. As you know, in Dominica, when Dominica became independent, it decided to adopt a Republican-style government. You know, they have a president and not a governor general. Mm-hmm. Ghana has long repudiated the British monarchy, and the news coming out of Barbados indicate that the Motley government will soon be amending its constitution to removing the British monarchy as a head of state and replacing the monarchy with a Republican-style system, meaning a president elected or a president appointed by specified or agreed means. So what we are now beginning to witness is a gradual movement towards the replacement of the British monarchy. For my part, I have nothing against the British monarchy. Certainly when I served as Prime Minister, we had an excellent relationship with the palace, with Her Majesty. But I do think that we have to complete the circle of our independence. There are two areas that are jumping at us to make sure we have a totally indigenous constitution, and we have a constitution in our own likeness and in our own image. One is the appeals to the Privy Council, which I think we need to replace, and we need to move on to the Caribbean Court of Appeal as quickly as possible and deal with the constitutional independence. Second is in time to replace the Governor General with a president selected by the people of St. Lucia. The formula by which we get a president and adopt a Republican status, of course, is something to be discussed and to be worked on. But I believe that the monarchy as currently exists is really an anachronism, and it's not in our likeness, not in our image, and the time has come for us to adopt a Republican-style government. So this may surprise a lot of people. It is not something that is on our immediate political agenda. And I would only say, too, that there's a lot that divide the political parties in St. Lucia, ideologically and otherwise. There are not many common points of agreement because we have been shaped differently. The irony of it all is that for the United Workers' Party, John Compton was quite a rebellious politician. I think if he had his own way, a lot of what he inherited from the UK would have been repudiated and changed. But he was, I think, a creature of his times. And his thinking might have been closer to the Labour Party in terms of the constitutional inheritance. But of course, that didn't happen. That's history. But I think when you're contemplating these changes, it's critical and crucial that both political parties have a consensus. There's shared agreement between them that these initiatives are critical and crucial. If the partisan division remains, then it becomes very, very problematic.
I see. And growing up, because this is a question I asked growing up, and the response I would get is, well, we have to stay with the British because, if somebody invades us with a military, then the UK will come in and help us and jump in. And so that's why we have to stay with them. I don't know what the accuracy of that is.
That can't be accurate now. It may have been accurate when we had associated states or when we were a colony, but there are several realities that we have to face. The dominant power, the power that exerts the greatest influence from a national security point of view is the United States, because we are in its sphere of influence. And you could have got no greater state than that. And during the Second World War, when we had a military or two military bases here in St. Lucia, right. And both of them, of course, were American bases. That's the first thing. The second thing is the United Kingdom is no longer a serious world power. Right. Since the Second World War, its influence has diminished. So too has its economic power. And side by side with that has been, of course, its own military competence and its own military power. That too has suffered diminution over the last couple of years. So really, you're looking at a country that is no longer a dominant world military power, and it will take a lot out of the United Kingdom if, God forbid, there was some issue in the Eastern Caribbean to be able to come to the rescue and to the support of the people of the Eastern Caribbean. That does not mean that we should not maintain our ties with the UK. We have to maintain our ties with the UK. But the reality is that as a major military player, we just have to forget them, because they don't have the capacity to give us the kind of support that we need. So adjustments really have to be made. If you notice, there are fewer and fewer British ships in our waters. Yes, we get an occasional ship every couple of years or so, but it means that the military presence of the British have declined significantly. I mean, don't misunderstand me. The British still do have the capacity to wage war and to defend itself, as happened in the Falklands. They can. But simply, they're not able to maintain a military presence in the way they did in colonial days at all, because they're no longer a world power of huge significance.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of funny because some people don't really realize just how far the British influence extended around the world. And it's kind of ironic because of just how small England is as a nation. But
don't misunderstand me, it's a remarkable civilization.
Right.
For a small country to have dominated the world the way they did. It's an amazing historical feat. And like you, I think about it all the time. And you wonder how this happened. But of course, you know, the thing is that when countries dominate technology at particular points in history, right, it is reflected in their military power. So the British was able to dominate during the Industrial Revolution. They ushered in the thing called the Industrial Revolution throughout the world. They were, in some ways, the pioneers. They were the innovators. And that was also reflected in the military power that they had, the technology that they had, as well as the extraordinary moral courage which they had to maintain their empire. So, as I said, there are moments in history, there are periods in history, and there's no question that the military power of the UK is disproportionate, or was disproportionate to the size of the country. And if there's any comfort some people want, England or the United or the UK, it's just another island.
It is.
It's a huge island, but yet it was an island that had conquered the world.
Yeah. So I think there's a lesson to be taken from that for us as an island nation.
Absolutely.
Now we talked a little bit about the UK's current military power. It kind of makes me think about Caribbean collaboration and Caribbean cohesion. How healthy would you say the OECS and CARICOM? Like, how healthy do you think they are right now as institutions or organizations?
It has been a difficult period for the region, for the Caribbean. Difficult on two fronts. One, you have to remember that before COVID, the islands went through a very difficult economic cycle because of the global recession. A lot of countries suffered. I mean, economies were battered. And certainly in our cases in Lucia, we had to cope with the fallout from this global recession.
And just to be clear, you're referring to the 2008 recession?
Yeah, 2008, well, 2008, 2010 upwards.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the heels of that, now we have had the COVID pandemic. Inevitably, with these problems and these difficulties, countries in the region tended to look inwards at their own capacities to resolve their own problems. And in the last couple of years, the OECS and CARICOM have not been as influential as they may have been in the past. And very clearly, adjustments had to be made by these organizations. Of the two institutions, the OECS is perhaps better grounded than CARICOM. Why? Because of the shared services coming out of the OECS. For example, the OECS has mechanisms to allow us to engage in bulk purchasing of drugs for our hospitals and medical institutions. We have a shared court, which is an OECS court, and our Chief Justice is selected on the basis of agreement between prime ministers. Judges are appointed on the basis of a Judicial Legal Services Commission. So you have that, and there are several programs managed by the OECS, entrusted to them by international organizations. For example, the beautification of the city center is being handled by funds made available by the World Bank, which my government, when I was in office, had negotiated, but with the OECS being the executing agency for it. Okay. So the reality is that the OECS is better grounded in the lives of the people of the OECS region. And let's not forget there have been some benefits. I mean, in my time, the governments in office allow for freedom of movement between the OECS countries. So you can travel to another OECS country with just your ID card. You're allowed to stay 6 months in any other OECS country. We have not been swarmed as a result of that. Some of those initiatives exist, but not exist in CARICOM, but not the way that it exists in the OECS. So OECS is more deeply entrenched. It is institutionalized. Yeah. It is part of the governance arrangements of the Eastern Caribbean. However, I cannot say that in the last couple of years that the OECS has really had a dominant role in the lives of the people of the OECS. And I think just like the governments have been going through very difficult times, the OECS has had to make adjustments to cope with the stresses and the challenges of the period. Now, CARICOM exists as a wider organization as you know it. It is not as deeply institutionalized because there are not many things in CARICOM that translate practically into the daily lives of the people of the region, except, of course, the single market and economy, which is still in its formative years. There are institutions of CARICOM that all countries do not accept. For example, we have a Caribbean Court of Justice. Only a few countries subscribe to it because some of us have not abandoned the Privy Council or Final Court of Appeal. So the CARICOM does not loom as large in our lives as the OECS. One of the things that has struck me, though, has been the issue of leadership of these international organizations. My impression is that perhaps in the period that we are in, we did not necessarily get the most imaginative leadership of the institutions. Don't misunderstand me. I think the people who serve these institutions are dedicated. They're very committed, but they themselves had very little room to maneuver in the very difficult times that we have had. And it was a very different kind of leadership, more technocratic rather than more inspiring and perhaps necessary because of what we are going through. I believe, however, that as we emerge out of the pandemic and as life returns to some kind of normalcy, more demands are going to be made on these institutions, more adjustments. And the key question will be how much we have learned from the experiences we have had, so that we can continue the business of transforming these organizations to meet the aspirations of the founders of these organizations, because we're still very, 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 very far off. Mercifully, they're not moribund, meaning that these organizations are on their way to their natural death. I think there's enough evidence to suggest that they will require resuscitation and revival. And it would come once, of course, the countries in the region reestablish their footing and can say that they have brought the pandemic under control, so they can begin again to look at the larger issues. But even during the pandemic, you have seen some remarkable exchanges. You have seen excellent statements of cooperation. I mean, you look at what happened in St. Vincent with the Russian countries in the Eastern Caribbean rallied around St. Vincent, and look at the problem with the virus. We have a serious problem in that there's a lot of resistance to the virus. There are a lot of persons who don't believe in vaccinations, and St. Vincent has had to ship some of its vaccines, which it got under the COVAX facility, to Trinidad and Tobago. So too has Grenada. So there are excellent statements of cooperation between states, which seem to suggest that the logic and the necessity of cooperation has to remain part of our lives for a long time to come. And we're going to need these organizations.
Okay. There's one thing that I'm very passionate about. It's not on the docket here, but I'm committed to making transportation and travel between Caribbean islands more accessible. I think in order for there to be greater levels of Caribbean unity, it has to be easy to travel between states. It has to be a common thing. If I want to head to St. Vincent or Grenada tomorrow, I want to be able to hop on a ferry and cross the water and just get there and get some business done. And then if I want to get to Dominica the same day, I have a transaction to do in Dominica, I want to get there, and I think that's the direction we should be headed. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But we have to face the realities of travel in the region, though. I mean, there's no question that air travel is exceedingly expensive.
Right.
And there's a healthy debate as to whether the taxes imposed by member states of CARICOM, including, of course, OECS countries, is a major cause of the problem because the argument is that the taxes, in fact, have made the price of tickets very, very expensive. I mean, there is some truth to this, because if you look at the tickets when they're issued, you pay taxes not just in your own country when you're departing, but you're also paying taxes at the receiving end, to the country you're going to and to the country you're leaving. So there is an issue. But we have to come to terms, and the notion that the Caribbean public can continue to rely on governments to pay for air travel, I think that has to be revisited, and we have to have a far more imaginative approach. I agree with you that ferries have great potential in the region. I mean, to ship, for example, agricultural supplies from St. Lucia to Barbados is a real challenge, because we don't have that movement of marine traffic as we used to before. And that can be cured to some extent if there's a ferry service. And I believe that the experience we've had with both Martinique and Dominica is very, very useful, because you have daily ferries from Martinique to St. Lucia. You can go as far as Dominica on the ferry. I mean, I've been on the ferry and I quite enjoyed it, despite the fact that the seats sometimes can be very intimidating.
It can be a little choppy.
the trip was really very wonderful. Now that needs to be extended, let us say, to Barbados and upwards the island chain. I think economies of scale are possible with ferries, and leave air traveling for those, of course, who seem to have the means and the ability to meet the necessary costs. I think where the governments can invest much more is actually in ferries across the region. And if we can do that, there will be far greater movement than is the case. Time is also very critical and crucial. You want to know that if you board a ferry in, say, Lucian to go to Barbados, some 80-something miles away, that you can do so within a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
And it's not going to take you a whole day and a night. So the quality of ferries do matter. Yeah. But I think there is great scope, and you're absolutely correct, that the absence of greater contact between countries, absence of opportunities for travel, is actually holding back on the integration of people of the region. I mean, I still suffer from acute nostalgia. I remember when I was going to Jamaica to do my first degree, we traveled from St. Lucia on the Federal Maple or Federal Palm. And it was a long journey of a couple of days, but we stopped in every island.
Wow.
And in every island, we met groups of UE students who were waiting for the boat to travel up to Jamaica. And they gave us such a wonderful time. I mean, we did all kinds of things with them. And of course, on the way up to Jamaica, we made a lot of noise. We sang a lot. We did a lot of things. And a lot of us still remember those days with nostalgia. And it was very cheap. I still remember that when I was going to Jamaica, the passage was so much, just around 50-something EC dollars. I still remember that. And I hope somebody listening to me say, no, you have it wrong. But that $50-something dollars still remains in my mind. And the thought that you can get to Jamaica on a federal boat at just $50-something dollars EC is, of course, very attractive and very alluring. So you're right.
Of course.
It has great potential. And I think the governments perhaps should focus more on building a ferry fleet to transport people around the island than perhaps trying to invest in supporting airlines to fly from one island to the next.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about that. I want to lean into that. So anybody, if you're a listener that's watching this, listening to this, if you want to work on that, reach out. Email us at iknowthepictures@gmail.com. Let's hear what you have to say. If you're watching this, let us know in the comments if you think that's a good idea. But let's make it happen. Let's make that happen. I have a few more questions for you here, Dr. Anthony. I don't know how much time you have, though, because I think we've exceeded the time that I told you.
Let's see. What's the time now? Let's do another 15 minutes. So we do an hour and a half.
Okay. All right.
Another 15 minutes. So let's start. Let us say at 4:30.
Yeah.
So I'm always available again.
Okay, and that's really good news. The first one that I want to dive into is, what are some things that you would say across the course of your political career so far that you've learned about humanity, you people?
Okay. I've always said to young politicians that they must never give up on people. There are good, decent people. No matter what your individual experience may be, but there are still good people in our lives, people who will help to change our civilization, people who will make a difference. And we can't judge the whole of humanity by a few individuals who seek to tarnish the reputation of people and do what is unlawful, what is wrong, what is unacceptable. There are good people, and you have to continue to believe in humanity. I am always struck by this in my own daily life, that I meet good, decent people, and who would go out of their way to do things for me, for example, and who will understand that there's a larger purpose to life. The day you begin to give up on humanity, the day you enter into a world of despair, because the reality is you can't survive without other persons around. You need tolerance, and tolerance is really key. You're going to meet people with different views, different ideas, and tolerance of other opinions, other beliefs is crucial. Patience. You have to understand that not everything can happen quickly. There are proposals you may make today that people reject outright, and you feel hurt and disappointed because they have rejected those proposals. But then something happens, and the proposal that you made today suddenly makes good sense tomorrow. So you need to be patient. You need to be patient in trying to introduce ideas and to introduce concepts. In my own political life, I see it all the time, that the things I may have proposed at an early period that people rejected and said, well, why you want to do this? Why you need to do this? And then suddenly something happens that justifies the very existence of what you're doing. Sometimes, of course, circumstances in history are compelling. I'm going to be political just a little minute, but just to make a point. It's like the laptops program in school children. When this was introduced by the government that I led, and I explained that it was not just a political statement that you're giving laptops to children. It is more than that. It is a tool of empowerment. Firstly, our children would be like children throughout the rest of the world, because they could get access to the same information that children in Europe were getting, in the UK, in the United States, in Canada. They could get access to it. I mean, it's a tool of empowerment. Secondly, it's a tool for equality in education, because a lot of parents of very poor children would not have been able to buy a laptop. They just couldn't afford it. And in the event, the little income they had to be invested in ensuring the survival of the family, survival of the children, etc. So it became an important tool of equity for the country to be able to assist, to drive to education. And thirdly, it was a statement that we had to face a new reality, that this technology will become a major tool for education, for your exams. And look at what's happening now, because there's a great experiment about having online examinations. I mean, and that goes back to my point I made to you earlier on. Who would have thought that the world was changed so quickly and so rapidly? Yet COVID forced it on us. I mean, now students at UWI are no longer doing exams, written exams, but the exams are on their laptops and their exams are online, as is happening with our children. But what happened? Very unfortunately, the program was stopped. And yes, it caused me a lot of dismay, a lot of disappointment. It's something that was so important, that the vision that we shared at the time, that I shared, that vision was not understood, and political opportunism took over. But it took COVID, the pandemic, to say to us that we were wrong, that really you needed it. And had we kept the program, we would not have been disadvantaged as we are. So my point to you is this: there are moments in history when it's just not right. The time is not perfect for the ideas that we have. And we have to understand that we need to be tolerant, we need to be patient, because, to go back to my words, the right moment may not have come. And part of the skill set we need to have is to know when is the right moment to take a step. Sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we get it right. But I also believe that there's a certain mystery. We don't have to fight it, but we need to understand it. The truth is, I don't know why some of us are in the business of offering our skills and our services to people, offering ourselves in the cause of humanity. Whether, for example, it is to feed those who are unable to feed themselves, whether it's, of course, transforming their lives, whether it's being just a nurse, for example. And just think of the pressures the nurses are undergoing right now, coping with COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Just think of that. They're serving humanity. They're serving the cause of humanity. And all I'm saying to you is that I don't think we should fight with the mystery. Fight with asking yourself, why do we do what we do? Because if you ask me and ask a lot of others like me, well, why did you give up so much to get involved in politics? Why did you have to suffer all of this, the abuse that was heaped on you, the things, the lies, the things that are said about you? Why did you do it? I don't think you can really answer the question as to why you gave yourself in the service of persons who needed you. I mean, the solace is that you were able to transform lives and shape lives and make a difference. And somehow that was really the satisfaction that you got. That is how you measured yourself.
Yeah.
Your ability to change the quality of life of a person. Yes, some of us survive on our dreams, some of us survive on our vision, some of us want to bring our ideas to life. That is also very critical and crucial. But I leave you with the words that you will meet disappointments along the way. People are going to hurt you. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to compromise you. But that's not any reason for you to lose your faith in people. There are good, decent individuals out there who think like you and who, too, understand that their own mission in life is to be in the cause of humanity.
Okay, that's very well said. We only have 6 more minutes. So I think it's time for just one last question. It's not my least favorite question. It's basically, what was the most surprising thing to you about politics when you started your career? When you came into your political career, what was the most surprising thing?
You know, that one, I have to think about it. I really do, Kelly. I have to think about that one because the way you put the question, what was the most surprising thing? I may change my views later.
Okay,
and
that's fine.
Meaning that if you were to ask me the same question 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, that having thought of it, I'll give you a different answer. But perhaps I can tell you that one of the things that fascinated me is how quickly people became disappointed in you. And how quickly they cut their ties with you. And on the one hand, they thought you had changed, that you had ceased to be the person whom they knew prior to politics. And they didn't understand that you are struggling to be the person who they knew all along. And that politics was changing you, redefining you, but there was this battle within you to say, no, that's not who I am.
Right.
And I was sometimes quite stunned when people who were once close to me decided to cut the links, to go in a different direction. Some because I was not able to deliver on the things that they wanted. And some because they may have asked me to do things that were improper, which I couldn't yield to and would not do. But it was a redefinition of relationships and friendships. And some of it happened very, very quickly. Now, at my age now, I am able to reflect on this a lot. And mercifully, some of the friendships that I had that were dear to me, I'm able even now to be able to approach these people and say, look, whatever happened, that's not who we were. Let's rediscover what we once, let us rediscover what we once knew. And then one or two persons have been able to mend the fences that way. And we have talked frankly and openly about what we once knew and what occurred that allowed us to take different roads. But what has always stunned and surprised me is the ease with which people would jettison relationships and friendships because of their perception of you and how you're handling power and who you are. But as I said to you, Kelly, that question has taken me by surprise. I may have given you a credible answer, but I'm going to reflect on it. If the next 2 or 3 weeks or 2 years you ask me, I might have a different response. But certainly, in retrospect, I think that was one of the more fascinating aspects of that life.
Yeah, and I think that makes complete sense, given that I think on this side of life, the two most divisive things, the things that pull people apart the easiest, politics or religion, and so it makes it makes sense that people pivot very quickly in that kind of climate. And so, Dr. Anthony, I want to tell you again that I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to speak with me, speak about these things freely and openly. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that the viewers and listeners as well can resonate with that. So I really want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's been an interesting conversation. I mean, very interesting questions, and in a sense, you have allowed me to explore and to talk about things that I don't have the opportunity to talk about. I mean, I am always disappointed by the fact that there is so much for the media to explore in this country, and they don't. They get preoccupied with other things. As you said at the outset, there are very fascinating stories to tell. And part of the problem is that a lot of people in the media do not have the skill to discern whether stories are to go for them and to explore, because there's so much that can be fascinating and so much that can be interesting. And this evening, you surprised me, and I think your mom did a very good job.
I'm sure she'll appreciate hearing that.
You take care, and all the very best to you.
Thank you very much. Guys, for those of you watching, as usual, we're going to be back on June 14th. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Family Reflections. Dr. Anthony, enjoy the rest of your day. And guys, thanks for joining us. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you now. Bye now.